Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It is March 30th, 2024. We are in the Old Testament book of Esther. We're going to read chapter 2 today. Uh, the king is kind of having, I don't know, second thoughts. He's realizing he just banished the queen and now he's got no queen. But in Persia, the king's word is the law and it can't be undone. So he's kind of dejected a little bit. He goes to his advisors and ask them what should he do, and they say, hey, you know what, let's get all the virgins in Persia together, and you can take your pick of one of them and make her queen. And the king says, oh, that's a good idea, let's do that. Now we're going to be introduced to Mordecai, a Jewish man, and he's going to be very prominent through the rest of this story. We see his loyalty to God, his loyalty to his niece, his loyalty to his people. There's a section in here where it talks about Mordecai being that he was taken into exile into Persia originally. Now that would have been about 114 years before this story, so that would either make him very old or there's a different explanation. The different explanation is these ancient authors would have said, you know, Mordecai went into exile when his ancestor went into exile. So bear that in mind as we go through. Now he's a Benjamite. He's of the tribe of Benjamin. His great-great-grandfather is Kish, who's also the father of Saul. So he is related to Saul somehow through the genealogies that we love so much. He's taking care of his niece. His niece's name is Hadassah, is her Jewish name, but her Persian name is Esther. And that's how we're going to refer to her all the way through. So we're told she's a very beautiful woman, virgin. Ooh, well, then she's going to get swept up into this call for virgins to be taken before the king. So that's how she goes into the story. And we're going to see how she handles this and her faithfulness to God and to her people. Now, we don't ever actually get a direct reference to God in here, so we have to look at God behind the scenes and understand that he's always working here. He was working when the queen got banished. He's working that, okay, now Esther's part of this group of virgins that are brought here. Esther's going to win the heart of the eunuch that's over the harem that she's in. So she gets elevated status there. God was responsible for that. Mordecai ends up in places where he hears things. God's hand is working in there. So that's where we see God in this book of Esther. Now she's taken into this harem. This is the harem of the virgins. The king, when he wants a woman, he calls for the eunuch to send him one of the virgins, and the eunuch picks the one he wants and sends them off, and they're allowed to take one thing. So the fact that Esther is in good with that guy, well, now he's looking out for her. So he's going to send her when it's favorable for Esther to go to the king. Now after the king sleeps with that virgin, the virgin goes to the second harem, which is all the concubines, all the women that the king has had at least once. And usually that's where they stay, but if you really make an impression on the king, he can pull you out from that group for a repeat encounter with the king. Now above that would be one of his wives or the queen, and they're out of the harem. They live in the palace, which at this point in our story is empty. Nobody fills that role. So we're going to see Esther go from that first harem. The eunuch trains her and teaches her, and when he thinks she's ready to appeal to the king, so maybe he thinks, hey, this is going to be a concubine that he's going to want to acknowledge more than once, he sends Esther to the king. And the king is so impressed with her that he says, that's the one, that's the queen. I'm going to marry her, and she's going to be the queen. Then we get a second little story with Mordecai, that he just so happens to overhear a plot against the king, and he takes that to Esther. So now Mordecai is being elevated, so he's the queen's uncle. Possibly he's getting recognized and moved through the ladder of advisors. He tells the king is so grateful that he records this event down. So he doesn't actually do anything about it, but he does record it, and that'll come into important play a little bit later. So let's go ahead and we're going to read Esther chapter 2. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus subsided, he remembered Vashti, what she had done and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's servants who attended him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather all the beautiful young virgins to Shushan, the citadel, into the women's quarters under the custody of Hegai, the king's eunuch, custodian of the women, and let beauty preparations be given them. Then let the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti." This thing pleased the king, and he did so. In Shushan, the citadel, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Kish had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives who had been captured with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And Mordecai had brought up Hadassah, that is, Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman was lovely and beautiful. When her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So it was, when the king's command and decrees were heard, and when many young women were gathered at Shushan the citadel under the custody of Hegai, that Esther also was taken into the king's palace, under the care of Hegai, the custodian of the women. Now the young woman pleased him, and she obtained his favor, so he readily gave beauty preparations to her, besides her allowance. Then 7 choice maidservants were provided for her from the king's palace, and he moved her and her maidservants to the best place in the house of the women. Esther has not revealed her people or family, for Mordecai had charged her not to reveal it. And every day Mordecai paced in front of the court of the women's quarters to learn of Esther's welfare and what was happening to her. Each young woman's turn came to go in to King Ahasuerus after she had completed 12 months of preparation, according to the regulations for the women. For thus were the days of their preparation, apportioned 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with perfumes and preparations for beautifying women. Thus prepared, each young woman went to the king, and she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the women's quarters to the king's palace. In the evening she went, and in the morning she returned to the second house of the women, to the custody of Sheshagaz, the king's eunuch who kept the concubines. She would not go into the king again unless the king delighted in her and called for her by name. Now when the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter, to go in to the king, she requested nothing but what Hegai, the king's eunuch, the custodian of the women, advised. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all who saw her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace. In the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign, the king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins. So he set the royal crown upon her head, and he made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast, the feast of Esther, for all his officials and servants, and he proclaimed a holiday in the provinces, and gave gifts according to the generosity of a king. When virgins were gathered together a second time, Mordecai sat with the king's gate. Now Esther had not revealed her family and her people, just as Mordecai had charged her, for Esther obeyed the command of Mordecai as when she was brought up by him. In those days, while Mordecai sat within the king's gate, 2 of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Iteresh, doorkeepers, became furious and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. So the matter became known to Mordecai, who told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. And when an inquiry was made into the matter, it was confirmed, and both were hanged on a gallows, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. May God bless the reading of his word, and may God bless you. Bye.